The Lord has promised. The Lord has promised good to me. His word, my hope secures. He will my soul shield and portion be. As long as life endures. Can I get an amen, people?
Amen.
Amen.
You know, you guys ought to think about going into music. Well, welcome back. How was your coffee break? Were those cookies good from Bear Butte? They were, weren't they? You could tell they were from Bear Butte. Did you make them all, Bonnie? I thought so. Well, welcome back. If we could get our elected leadership back here to the front, we're going to need to do some more elections. We're going to be electing people to the discipline and the consultation committees. These are the committees that we never want to be called into being. What? What's that? Yeah. If you need them, you really need them. Yeah, we've got a 30-year history of not ever having the discipline committee called into being. Unfortunately, I was the first bishop to have to need the consultation committee to come and do work, and yeah, it just is very unpleasant. But it is very important work. So I don't want you to think that it's just sort of pro forma. The people that have been invited, I would certainly hope that they know that they've been called to a position that, if needed, would have great impact on the life of the church. So if we could have, did you have any announcements, Carla? No. If I could have a credentials report, and I believe I am supposed to hear from Mara Stilson.
Alrighty, for a credentials report at 3 p.m., clergy voting members 111, lay female voting member 162, lay male voting members 104, total lay voting members 266, and total voting members 377.
All right, thank you. Now, if I could have the Reverend David Schuld, who is the current chair of the Support to Ministries Committee. So what committees? What's going on? I'll go talk to those guys.
You go talk to those guys. Do I have all of these that are listed on the sheet? Up on the screen, these are all for me?
Yep.
I'm so lucky.
What's going on with the mic?
For the Discipline Committee, there is one clergy vacancy. The name we have is Reverend Craig Wexler from Pierre. Or if you watch NBC Weather Report, Pierre. Just yesterday, I promise you. Bishop Dave, would you like me to go through the slate, or would you like me to move one by one? All three?
Yeah.
Thank you, Bob. On the Lutheran Social Services Board of Director, 3-year term, no more than 3 consecutive re-elections. There are 2 vacancies. We have Reverend Velma Larson from the Southeast Conference and there is a vacant position from the Northern Plains Conference. Lastly, Chapel in the Hills Board of Directors, there are 2 vacancies. We have Becky Hollibaugh of Rapid City and Sandy Olin, also of Rapid City.
Okay, thank you. Is there a nomination for, can I have that screen back up again? Is there another nomination for LSS Board of Directors from Northern Plains? Yes? Was someone nominated out of the caucus this morning? Okay. All right. It would then normally fall to the Synod Council. Are you okay with that? To pick a name from Northern Plains. Is that all right? Okay. All right. Are you ready to cast a unanimous ballot? Would someone move that? Is there a second? All right. To cast a unanimous ballot for the clergy vacancy on discipline and for Lutheran Social Service, Belma Larson, Chapel in the Hills, Becky and Sandy. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? They are elected. It is my privilege to introduce Betty Oldenkamp. I have known her for a while, back in peer days when I served at Lutheran Memorial. It was my privilege to watch her work for the children of South Dakota as she did her work with kids across South Dakota. And it's been my privilege to work with her now as president of the Lutheran Social Service. If you would warmly greet Betty.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Am I okay on volume? Okay, then I don't have to use that outdoor voice that I get in trouble for occasionally. So, good afternoon and greetings to all of you from Lutheran Social Services. I do apologize for not being here this morning for the opening session and introductions. I was at work. I was actually live streaming, and when I heard Bishop Zelmer start to do introductions, I went, uh-oh. But believe me, I would have much rather been here than doing the work that I was doing, which was wrapping up our budget planning for the upcoming fiscal year. But very grateful for the partnership that LSS is able to have in our delivery of social ministry. Your partnership with LSS is expressed in many, many ways. It's the quilts that always arrive to welcome the kids that come into care with us. It's the hygiene kits that show up for our kids in shelter care, the furnishings that are collected and delivered to welcome new refugees into South Dakota. It's your financial support, and always it's your prayers for those that we serve and for our staff. As a social ministry of the ELCA, LSS serves as the hands and feet of God. LSS is a ministry of presence, and we demonstrate that ministry by walking alongside of people during those challenging moments in their lives. We meet people where they are in life. We're not judgmental of them or their circumstances, and perhaps most importantly, we believe they can change their futures. I want to give you just a couple of examples of how the ministry of LSS brings hope and healing to those in need. At LSS, we believe that the best place for kids to grow up is in a safe, stable family. But we know that many families experience dysfunction. So we have been one of the first agencies in South Dakota to implement an intervention called functional family therapy that addresses issues within family dynamics and relationships. During this past year, we've worked with 290 families. Our successful completion rate with functional family therapy is 70%. That means that 203 families are improving their overall functioning, and their children are able to stay in their home. But what tells the story far better than the numbers is the tearful expressions of gratitude from parents because we've helped them to save their family, to be able once again to talk with their children, and oftentimes they admit talk with their spouses, to stop fighting, to stop blaming, to change their futures. Now, I don't think that this will come as a surprise to you, but South Dakota is a rural state. Yeah, it is. And as the population in many areas becomes increasingly sparse, it's difficult to maintain access to mental health and substance abuse treatment. So LSS is leading the way in using technology to overcome the barrier that distance presents to access to treatment. For 2 years, we've been part of a national demonstration project to test the use of technology to deliver substance abuse treatment groups in rural areas. We're using something called Zoom, which is like Skype, only it's secure and meets all the HIPAA requirements for confidentiality. But this application allows anyone with a smart device or computer with camera and sound capacity to participate in a treatment session. Probably the biggest hurdle we've had with this has been our counselors who would prefer to work face-to-face because that's the way they were trained, and also just having the reliability and the technology itself. So I thought about trying a live demonstration today of how this works, but I decided to go low-tech and just have a picture. So if you could bring up the picture. And you can see a little bit there. Our counselor, Chad, is sitting in our Sioux Falls office. In our offices in Rapids, Sioux Falls, and Aberdeen, we have what we call Zoom rooms, and they're just set up with the equipment. And so on the screen you see 6 people, and that's not that old Hollywood Squares game, but those are actually 6 clients from across the state of South Dakota. They may be sitting in their living room, at their kitchen table, maybe they're in their office, maybe they're in a church, and they're able to join this chemical dependency treatment group remotely. From a practical standpoint, this means that they're not driving miles or hours to get to an appointment. They're not having excessive time away from their job, and they're getting more immediate access to service. It also means that our staff aren't driving, and so they are able to serve more people because they're spending less time in a vehicle. One of the things that we're finding out with this that we didn't expect is that we're actually seeing people be more successful at completing their treatment when they're participating through this telehealth application than when they're coming in face-to-face. So the data on that is really new. The study's still going on, but we're really pleased with that. And then the last piece that I want to talk about is our service to resettle refugees in South Dakota. Our work with refugees began in 1948, and I know that many of your congregations have assisted in that work over the years. Of all the things that LSS does, I always believe that it is our resettlement work that truly lives out our heritage, our Lutheran heritage of welcoming the stranger, loving our neighbor, and offering hope. It's also the most controversial thing that we do. And right now we are in very uncertain times in regard to U.S. policy around resettlement and immigration. As of today, we still have arrivals coming into the U.S. We're on target to hit 70,000 for this year, which has been the number we've been at for a few years. But we have been advised to prepare for a reduction of up to 50%. But even though we may experience that temporary drop in new arrivals, we believe that our nation's immigrant history and our humanitarian convictions will prevail, and that we will continue to welcome refugees and immigrants to the United States and to South Dakota. But I would like you to help me out and tip those scales a little bit by praying for our policies for refugee resettlement and by advocating with your elected officials. Several years ago, we recognized that we needed more space for our resettlement services, especially our English language classes. And as we looked for an alternative location, we dreamed about a day where we might be able to bring several of our services together in one site. We knew that that would bring great benefit to our clients, and it would be more efficient in our operations. The very short version of this journey is that after a long search, we finally came up with what we think is the perfect location for LSS. So we seized that opportunity. We took a leap of faith and entered an agreement to purchase the property that we now call the campus on East Bank. There have been a lot of challenges along the way, and many days that I didn't think we'd ever make it. But about 6 weeks ago, we were able to move our Center for New Americans into their new home at the campus on East Bank. So you might be wondering, if we've already moved, why do we need a capital campaign? And that's a really fair question. And the answer is because this isn't just about the Center for New Americans. The Campaign for Hope is about shoring up LSS so that we're prepared for a second century of service, so that we can continue to bring hope and healing to those in need throughout South Dakota. We need to finish the remodeling of the second floor and build additional space so counseling services and our Center for Financial Resources can move to this site. We need to expand our technology capacity to support the delivery of mental health and substance abuse counseling through telehealth so we can reach those far, remote communities of South Dakota. We need to reduce our operating costs. We can do this by reducing some of the maintenance of multiple facilities and by eliminating the cost of leasing space. Throughout the initial stages of our campaign, I have been overwhelmed by the generous support that has come our way. The staff of LSS have committed $150,000 to this project. We have the support of our board members. The Sioux Falls business community has pledged over $1.25 million for this project. That's what has allowed us to do the work to get the Center for New Americans into this space. But we still need to complete this project. We still need over $2 million to accomplish this without taking on additional long-term debt. The LSS campus on East Bank is the cornerstone of a second century of effectively and efficiently serving communities throughout South Dakota. LSS touches lives 52,000 times a year, and every touch is an extension of this church. Every touch is the fingertips of God, bringing hope and healing to those in need. I ask for your prayers for the people that LSS serves and for our staff. And today, I ask for your prayerful consideration and support of the LSS Campaign for Hope. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Betty. I appreciate your work and appreciate your staff. If you want to have a great day, head down to the New American Center, and it's just the best. Love the folks that are working there, and love the people that are coming through there and making preparation to enter into our communities and finding work and making a home and having a new life. I would invite Becky Center and the Resolutions Committee to please come forward. Resolution number 2.
Resolution number 2, the subject is the LSS Campaign for Hope. The source is from all 7 conferences of the South Dakota Synod. Be it resolved that the South Dakota Synod Assembly celebrates the ministry of Lutheran Social Services of South Dakota by affirming the Campaign for Hope, and be it further resolved that congregations of the South Dakota Synod support the Campaign for Hope through prayer, volunteer assistance, and through a special congregational campaign to be conducted in the next 3 years, starting in the fall of 2017. And finally, be it resolved that the South Dakota Synod Assembly authorize the Synod Council to approve details of the campaign as it relates to the congregations of the South Dakota Synod. The recommendation is do pass.
The resolution is on the floor. Resolution 2 is on the floor. It is open for debate at this time. When you move to the microphone, remember to identify yourself and remember that you have 2 minutes. Microphone 2.
Just 2 minutes? No, it's fine. Pastor Alan Blankenfeld from Coleman and Midway. I just wanted to say that I'm standing here this afternoon because of LSF. Betty mentioned that in 1948, LSS started relocating refugees. The first group they relocated were Lutherans from Latvia. My mother was one of those refugees. And so I just want to say thank you to LSS for the great work that they do.
Thank you. Any additional speaking? Are you ready to vote? Yes? Okay. If you would pull out your voting devices. If you support Resolution 2, authorizing LSS to enter into this congregational campaign, please vote 1. If you do not approve, please vote 2. Please vote now. Please close the vote and display the results. Now, of course, that was the hard part, right? Now, the easy part is raising the money. So just so you know, when I did the last campaign at Lutheran Memorial, it was the worst financial year that Lutheran Memorial had during my 15 years with them until we ran this campaign as a part of our fall stewardship program. We ended the year with $50,000 in the black. We exceeded our goal of $30,000 by a mere $17,000. So we raised $47,000 where we had started out with a goal of $30,000. And we paid all of our bills, and we were able to give away an additional $50,000 at the end of the year. And it was because people caught the idea that it wasn't just a budget that we give to, that it was ministry that makes the difference in the lives of people. So I commend you to the work, and I hope that you run a great campaign, and I hope you go and make a visit down at the New American Center. They'd love to see you. And if you go for Thanksgiving, you will have the most incredible food experience that you've ever had in your life. When I was there this last year, I ate food that I had never even heard of. And I'm here today. So, all right, resolution number 10. Becky? Oh, gee, many Christmas.
Something about him being taller than me. Resolution 10. The subject is the resolution concerning immigration. The source is the Bear Butte Conference. Be it resolved that the South Dakota Synod of the Evangelical Lutheran Church of America, in America, affirms and encourages the member congregations to examine, promulgate, and support the objectives set forth in the 1969 Statement of the Lutheran Council in the USA found in the ELC's message on immigration adopted by the Church Council on November 16th, 1998. The recommendation is do pass.
Thank you. Anyone speaking to resolution number 10? Microphone 1. Microphone 1. You're still not on. Chris is moving. This is the only thing that I've ever seen in 36 years that could get Will Olson to be quiet on this.
Test, test.
Sorry, Will, it just seemed like low-hanging fruit. Microphone 1.
Good afternoon. I'm Pastor Willard Olson. I'm retired and living in Piedmont. I'm in town to celebrate the graduation of our granddaughter from Lincoln High School, the track champion of all of Class AA South Dakota. I had to get that in.
Come on. We'll go to microphone 2, or we'll get the mic to you.
Test. Thank you. I really rise to this resolution. I'm the author of the resolution. It's been revised a little bit by the Resolutions Committee, but I really want to call attention to the fact that the ELCA's message on immigration is available online. It's about 8 or 9 pages, not just three paragraphs that are there. This is not something new that you are being asked to vote on. This is something that's been around, as you see, since 1939 with the creation of Lutheran Immigration and Refugee Service. It's been around since the ELCA came into existence. So all we are asking, those of us who have voted on this from the Bear Butte Conference, that you seriously consider examining, promulgating, and supporting the objectives that are set forth in that document.
Thank you, Pastor. Anyone else speaking? I think that microphone does work if you want to give it a whirl, sir. Microphone 1.
My name is Jim Bishop, and I'm from the Bear Butte Conference, and I would just like to provide a quote from a lady by the name of all things, Emma Lazarus. Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to go to wretched refuse of your teeming shore. Send these, the homeless, tempest-tossed, to me. I lift my lamp beside the golden door. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone speaking? Seeing no one moving to the mic, are you ready to vote on resolution number 10? If you are in favor of resolution number 10, please vote A or 1. If you are against resolution number 10, please vote B or 2. Please vote now. Please close the vote and display the results. Resolution number 10 is passed. Before we move ahead, we need to move back. We need to elect the Reverend Stephen Sandus to the Consultation Committee. How can you serve? How can you serve on that? It's a lay position. All right, we'll work this out later. Let's vote for him now. You just feel eager to vote on something, so let's keep it up. All those in favor of having Stefan serve on the Consultation Committee, please say aye. Aye. Those that are opposed, same sign. You are elected. We may have to defrock you, but we'll get it worked out. We're now moving to the unblocked material. This is the part I told you this morning that if you wanted to deal with something specific, you needed to talk to Susan Letty, our secretary. No one has done that. So we are going to be dealing with resolutions 3, 4, and 5 as one group. And then we will deal with 6, and then we will deal with 7, and I'm going to tell you why after I've heard from Becky.
Resolution 3,
4 and 5. Yep.
4, and 5, yes. Resolution 3 the topic is the South Dakota Synod Constitution Amendments. The source is the Synod Council. Resolution 4, our Synod Amendments, the second part, and the Resolution 5, the subject there is the South Dakota Synod bylaw amendments. The Synod Council is the source for all of these. We will not be reading the resolves. The recommendation is do pass en bloc.
Thank you, Becky. So do you understand what you're doing, that you're actually voting on all 3 documents, all 3 resolutions at the same time? It is a simple majority vote because these were the matters that were approved at the last churchwide assembly. And because they were approved and we've adopted them, it only takes a simple majority vote because we're just simply bringing over the things that need to be brought over, and we can do that in body for this set of material. So all those in favor of accepting these amendments, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, they have been adopted. Thank you. Now, we're going to take 6 up, and I'll tell you why we left it out.
South Dakota Synod bylaw amendments 2. The source is the Synod Council. Again, I will not read the resolves, but the recommendation is to do pass.
These particular amendments are different because they are not a part of the model constitution. These were pieces that either were in our former constitution or things that we have adopted or changed, and because they are not brought to us from outside and approved by the churchwide assembly, we now need a 2/3 majority. So it does come with a due pass. The work was done by Synod Council over several meetings, and so are you ready to vote? So it takes a 2/3, so we need to actually vote by the voting pieces. If you are in favor of resolution number 6, please vote 1. If you are not in favor of resolution number 6, please vote 2. Okay, please close the vote and let us display the results. It is adopted. Thank you very much. Resolution number 7.
Resolution number 7, the subject is the South Dakota Synod Continuing Resolution Amendments. The source is the Synod Council. The resolves will not be read, but the recommendation is do pass.
Excuse me. Again, this takes a 2/3 because this was material that, just a majority vote? Sure, you could have told me that earlier, Chris. Are you in a concurrence? Fine. See what I have to put up with. All those in favor, we can now vote for this one. I'll trust you that we can get to a simple majority. All those in favor of resolution number 7, please signify by saying aye. All those opposed, it is adopted. I would like to commend the Synod Council. There was a lot of work done, an incredible amount of detail work. We're going to have our next Reformation moment. We're going to see the video, we'll see the question, and you'll have some conversation in your pews again. So let's see the video.
For 500 years, people have had a tough time coming to terms with what Luther understood happens in the Lord's Supper. Less than a decade after posting the 95 Theses, Luther found himself immersed in one of the greatest disputes in the history of the Church. When Christ said, "This is my body, this is my blood," did he really mean it? Luther disagreed with the Pope's notion that the priest has the power to change bread and wine into flesh and blood. Luther also didn't agree with others who argued that the bread remains only bread and the wine is not Christ's blood. So, what was Luther's understanding? As the story goes, in the middle of a debate, Luther refused to give an inch. When dealing with Jesus' words, is means is. Why was Luther so adamant? The communication of God's grace was at stake. At the Last Supper, Jesus announced his last will and testament, declaring what those sitting around him would receive after he died. And who was that? Well, the very ones who were about to betray and desert him. What would his betrayers receive as an inheritance? Listen again to Jesus' words. "This is my body, this is my blood, shed for you for the forgiveness of your sins." After he died, Jesus handed his estate, his forgiveness, over to those who sin against God himself. Luther knew this included himself and every Christian hearing these words. This helps us understand why he insisted on sticking to the simple words of Jesus. Keep in mind, to change or call into question the words in a last will and testament undermines the inheritance itself. The means of grace, the promise of the gospel, is forsaken, and people are left in the consequence of their sin. Is means is. All of this was said and done so you can remember, a mighty fortress is our God.
So the question is, Luther recognized that in the Lord's Supper, Jesus hands over his last will and testament to those who betrays him. What had to happen to Jesus for him to hand over the inheritance to you? What is the inheritance, and what do you do in order to be an inheritor? Does this make you feel comfortable, or should it be taken lightly? So turn to your neighbors and have a conversation. if I could have your attention. Susan, can I borrow you for just a second again? We've had any number of issues that have come up over the 10 years that I've been serving in this office, but this is a brand new first. We are so far ahead of schedule, we don't know what to do. Because I don't want to release you, and then because you won't show up for supper. And we have a great supper. And then you need to come back for the celebration tonight, and you want to hear Molly, you know, and I know some of you, and you just run off and start playing golf or something, I don't know. So we're going to do a couple of things. We'll probably let you go a little bit early so you can go see the vendors, because every year someone writes in that we never have enough time to go see the vendors. Well, you could learn everything about their family, not just about the displays. So, first thing that's going to happen, let me talk to Susan Marone for 1 second. Okay. All right, so we're going to pick up the compensation guidelines after I answer a question. A question has come forward from a couple of different locations, and it has enough merit that I will take a shot at answering it. So it wasn't a resolution or any of that kind of stuff, but it was why does the church not support Christians that are being persecuted in the Middle East? Why doesn't the church say something, and why doesn't the church offer them refugee status and bring those people when it seems like currently all we're bringing are Muslim people? So first and foremost, the church speaks, at least Liz has, on the last 3 attacks that have taken place in the Middle East, particularly the one in Egypt. I know that she had a statement out the next day. You need to be on the ELCA listserv whenever possible. I try to grab them and redistribute them through our listserv in South Dakota. But if you're signed up either for our listserv or for the churchwides, you would see those letters. So Liz has, Bishop Eaton has spoken out on those specific attacks. As far as refugees go, this is how it works in their world. First of all, you have to make it to a camp. And that is no small piece, particularly in the Middle East. So the first thing that has to happen, you have to get to a camp that's registered with some national government or with some specific international aid. So either the Red Cross camp or we have camps that we help support. So that's the first thing that has to happen. Then you have to make application. At the minimum, that is an 18-month process. You have to go through 5 different verifications. And now what has happened after 2009, 5 of the major federal agencies that deal with this, and that would be Defense, Intelligence, the CIA, the NSA, State Department, I'm trying to think of who the last one. What's that? Homeland Security, thank you very much. They share now a common database. So each of them, I'll be the refugee. So I've finally gotten to a camp, I've registered, and I've asked to come to the United States. And so they begin to look at my documents. I have to be able to prove who I am and who my family is. And then they began to do the deep research into Dave Zilmer and my kids that are with me. And that takes about 18 months. And then the piece that's been added is, and then they do a deep dive now on Facebook, on Twitter, and they look at that. And then 2 weeks before I would get on a plane and come to the United States with my family, then they do that all over again. They do one last look. And so if there's any issues at all in that process, I don't get on the plane. Okay? And then what's also changed, this happened, if I remember correctly, 4 years ago. There's now a continuation follow-up, particularly on Facebook and Twitter and those other social platforms. Those agencies continue to look at Dave Zellmer and what am I doing on Facebook? Or what am I saying on Twitter? They continue to monitor those as I've been relocated into the United States and I've arrived at my final destination. So the reason that we're getting Muslim people is that's who got to the refugee camps approximately 2 to 3 years ago. So those are the folks that come. The Christians that are fleeing, first of all, what did you hear me say? They have to get to a refugee camp. And for many of them, that is simply not possible. I mean, if prayers were ever needed, it would be for the people that are trapped in Mosul right now. And ISIL is doing everything they can to use approximately 300,000 people who have no stake in this except that it's their neighborhood. And they literally cannot get out as the fighting keeps getting smaller and smaller. And the nations of the world that are doing the support and the fighting have made the decision that they're not going to let them flee. They will not let ISIL flee. So I know that there's attempts to get civilians out, but it is, I mean, if prayers, truthfully, would be a place. So you could expect to see, about 2 years from now, Christian people coming from the Middle East, because I'm telling you, that's about as quick as it's going to happen. And so that's just how it works. This is not immigration. Refugees are people, the simple explanation to qualify as a refugee is if you go home, you're going to die. That's the easiest, simplest. So if those folks attempt to go home, they're not going to be alive. So what was different in Cameroon is the first wave was Christians. And the 250,000 people came over. In fact, most of them were Lutheran. And most of them related to people on the eastern side of Cameroon. And so as the fighting lessened, they were able to go home. Well, then there was a follow-on response, and a Christian group and a pagan group began to attack Muslim people and kill them. And so the secondary refugee flow that came out, almost all of that 65,000 that were there, almost all of them are Muslim people because they were being attacked and killed by others. Now, in this situation, none of those people are going to come to America. They're not asking to go to America. Life will finally get restored, and they're all going to go back home. The issue that we're seeing, particularly in Syria and in Iraq, northern Iraq, is at least in my next 10 years of lifetime, people are not going back there. So there will be a wave of Christian people that are coming to us in South Dakota, but it won't be for a while. So in my lifetime in South Dakota, I have seen Hmong people, I have seen Eastern Europeans, I've seen Russians, I've seen Jews from any number of different locations around the world, and those have been the people that have come to South Dakota. We don't control who comes here. That's the federal government's decision. Our job, working with LSS, is to receive them, to work with them, to get them fully embedded within our communities, and to work. That's the work of LSS. So I hope that's been helpful. If you've got questions, I'd be happy to talk to you. I know Secretary Berger would be happy to talk to you. Again, I would invite you to come down to the New American Center. It is a great way to spend half a day. So, was that helpful? Not helpful? Okay. If we could are you willing to move the agenda and that we deal with the issue of compensation guidelines at this time? There are things that we cannot move. We can't move LO's annual board meeting. We're not doing that. We're not moving worship, you know. So you got to come back tomorrow. All right. If we could go to resolution number what? Number 11. Becky, do you feel like you're getting your steps in?
Once again, resolution number 11. The subject is the 2018 compensation and guidelines for rostered ministers and lay staff. The source is the Committee for Support to Ministries and its compensation task force. Be it resolved that the 2018 compensation and guidelines for rostered ministers and lay staff, prepared by a task force for the Committee for Support to Ministries and recommended by the Committee for Adoption, be adopted as the policy of the South Dakota Synod by the 2017 South Dakota Synod Assembly. The recommendation is do pass.
Now, the person from the committee that was going to speak to that is not here today. He could not get out of work. Nick Oyen was, I believe, the chair of the committee, our task force that was doing the work. The way it generally works with Support to Ministries is we have one pastor and then 5 lay people are on the task force. And we invite them to see what's going on across the state with the economy and make recommendations as to what the guideline adjustment should be. And I do apologize for Nick not being here, but is there anyone else that did the work that would be willing to speak to the process, if nothing else? Microphone 2.
This is only about the 3rd time in almost 37 years around here that I've spoken at a Synod assembly, so if I have a little fear and trepidation in my voice, the assembly could have the choice. I can stand here and read for you the entire compensation guidelines material in the preliminary report, or I can just boil it down to what the basic bottom line is for the percentage increase that we came up with. After some considerable care, we didn't do this carelessly, and Nick is not the kind of guy that does things without some degree of work, and he did the lion's share of the review. So would you like to have the whole thing or just the percentage? I kind of figured that. The recommendation is a 3.5% increase. We thought that was reasonable considering the circumstances that we considered, so that's the recommendation's essence.
Okay. Susan Marone is interrupting from the back saying it's just 3%, not 3.5%. We should write down though that he spoke for the 3rd time in 36 years. That should probably go in the minutes, I think. We've had some pastors that actually request their own microphone, you know. I'm not going to say any names. All right. Let's do one thing since we do have actually a little bit of time and we have some moments. Why don't we introduce our new pastors? If we don't have them all in the room right now. Oh, we should vote. Well, what shall we say about these things? If God is for us, who is against us? Let's take out our voting devices. I've never had this problem. Too much time. I mean, wow. If you approve the compensation guidelines for this next year, and just so you understand, this then becomes the guiding principle from this moment on, into 18 until we meet again next year. So even though they say 18, they're actually starting right now. So as individuals come that would be called to serve in South Dakota, these are the numbers that call committees would be looking at. Okay? If you approve it, please vote A. If you want something else, please vote B. Vote below now. Close the vote and please display the result. It is adopted. Okay, congratulations. All right. Let's do some introductions because I see a couple of them. Is Michael DeCray in the room? Pastor Michael? Why don't you come down so people can actually see you? And we'll leave you down here. And then if we could get Lene Sorensen. I saw her earlier today. And Pastor Christopher Zeroff, I see him sitting there. Pastor Cheryl Matthews. And Pastor Eric Ortman. These are individuals that have come to serve congregations in South Dakota from outside of our synod, and it has been a privilege to get to know a couple of them as they have entered into work, and how about if we warmly greet them? Why don't you come over here? We'll try something new. Why don't you just tell us where you're serving and where you came from? How about that?
Mike DeCry. I'm serving at St. John's in Webster, and I came from Duluth, Minnesota, and I came home. I grew up in Brookings, so it's wonderful.
I'm Lene Sorensen. I'm serving here in Sioux Falls at Hope. And I came from Southwestern Texas Synod, Austin, and 90 degrees is nothing.
I'm Cheryl Matthews. I'm serving at Esteline, South Dakota, at a partnership between...
So I was in a little town called Colville, Washington, which was 40 miles from Canada and 40 miles from Idaho, so that's the easiest way to locate it.
I'm Chris Zeroff. I served my first call in southwestern Minnesota, Clarkfield, Minnesota, north of Marshall. I serve here at Gloria Dei, and I'm glad to be here and thankful to have you, so welcome. I was born and raised in Sioux Falls, so I'm really coming home.
Yeah.
Thank you. All right. Every year we give out an award for our work with the Hunger Appeal. And if that crew could come forward at this time. What? Well then. Yes. What? We have another video? Oh, great. Go get your cows, and we'll do video number 3.
Salvation by grace is a common expression nearly all Christians use. But does every Christian understand the phrase the same way? This is something Luther struggled with early on and then throughout his career. Luther had been raised and educated hearing about God's grace. But what Luther came to realize is the understanding of grace he was taught was not what Scripture said. In the 95 Theses, Luther recognized that the papacy was severely distorting the scriptural understanding of God's grace. The Pope declared that God's grace could be received through the purchase of a simple piece of paper issued by the Pope. The confusion was increased when people were taught that God's grace could be received in greater or lesser amounts. Purchasing an indulgence meant you received the highest level of grace. Luther recognized that Scripture said nothing of the sort. God's grace isn't a substance, and it couldn't be obtained like you would buy a watch or a ticket for a train. Grace isn't a substance. Luther understood that all of Scripture is telling us grace is God's disposition toward us. It's the attitude God has in his relationship with us. Think of it this way. God's disposition toward us is much like a parent's disposition toward their children. Parents make rules for the household, leave presents under the tree at Christmas, and provide food for the dinner table, all because of their attitude toward their children. Now let's return to that common expression, salvation by grace, and what it means. Simply put, it's the disposition and favor of God that brings us salvation. And as a way of emphasizing the point, Luther emphasized that by grace alone, by God's disposition and favor alone, we are saved. All of this was said and done so you can remember, a mighty fortress is our God.
All right. We hadn't really planned to use that, so we don't have the question. But I think I can come up with one. I bet you think I can. How does grace work in your world? Do you start to slip back into American civil religion where grace needs to be earned, or you have to somehow need to be worthy? Or is it just given as a gift? So turn to your neighbor and have a conversation about how grace works in your world. Let's call you back to order. Did you get that whole grace thing figured out? Got her squared away? All right. Did you know that it was 94 degrees outside? That is warm. So I'm going to invite Pastor Erica Lehman to please come forward and speak to you about the Hunger Appeal and Holy Cows.
All right. If you've been to this event before, you have probably seen me up here. This is something we've been doing now for about 9 years, and the rules kind of change because it's a little bit on the informal side, but we have been giving 2 cows, and they go one to the church that hasn't received it in the last few years with the highest per capita giving to ELCA World Hunger, and one to the church that just gives the most and hasn't received it in the last few years. And the reason that we do that is because smaller churches sometimes come up with spectacular giving despite having a very small average weekly worship attendance. And so it would be unfair if they were compared to a church that was 100 times as large. And in this synod, we have some of both. So this year we have a church that, as its average weekly worship attendance, had a 0 on my sheet, though that can't surely be right. I think maybe something just didn't get filled out, I'm not sure. But anyway, nevertheless, they gave over $14,000 to ELCA World Hunger, and that is St. John Lutheran Church of Bancroft, South Dakota. So that's pretty incredible. And then the church that gave the most overall has received it, but not for a few years, and they have been a faithful church in giving to World Hunger, and that is Our Savior's Lutheran in Sioux Falls. So the other award goes to them. Last year, the ELCA's focus in their giving campaign was on World Hunger, and that's why you heard about the wonderful giving overall across the church to World Hunger. And we tried to encourage every congregation in the synod to give something. We still have a number of congregations that prefer to give to local hunger, and I would like to encourage you to say that we can do both. And you do not necessarily have to give $14,000 to be important to the giving, giving to the work of ELCA World Hunger. And the website, elca.org/hunger, has an incredible array of resources and toolkits and things that you can use to come up with ideas, to do something new and creative, or just have a coffee hour or a special offering. Our congregation has a history of a Thanksgiving offering that has gone on for many years, and if your congregation is largely made up of farm families, Thanksgiving is a really good time to do that, but for others it's Lent or another season of the year. I want to lift up to you that you also have the opportunity to receive from ELCA World Hunger. One segment of the money that is spent within the United States is hunger grants. And through the years, South Dakota has received a number of hunger grants from the ELCA for a variety of things, for food pantries, for feeding programs, after-school programs. Various of our ministries have received grants, and I'm wondering, since we're not pressed for time, if there's anybody here who's aware that their congregation has used an ELCA World Hunger grant. I know Pueblo de Dios has received them. I think Huayatán. And what did you use it for? That's great. Oh my, that's significant. Okay, so the process of filling out the form is not terrible. It's online. It needs to be, well, sometimes, I know you're laughing at me, but sometimes people think, oh, a grant, you have to have a professional grant person to do it, but no, it's designed for you to do it without being excessively difficult. But the end of, I'm not making that sound. The end of June is when the applications need to be in, so right now, if you are doing something that could benefit from, the average grant is about $3,000, go ahead and apply. It's a little bit of a slow process because at the end of the summer, the applications from the South Dakota Synod come back to us for us to look at, and the money isn't actually awarded till next year. But talk to me or contact the ELCA World Hunger people. They exist to serve you, more or less. I mean, they're super, super helpful. If you have a bright idea of something you would like to do for World Hunger and you haven't really figured out the logistics, call them up. Ian Chester is the person that you talk to on the phone who will either put you in touch with Ryan Cummings, who does education, or he will help you himself. They will write something for you. A few years ago, we had a little motorcycle ride for World Hunger, and they wrote us a litany, especially for us, for that occasion. On my booth, I have some Team ELCA banners, and Team ELCA is a program that ELCA World Hunger has written so that if you want to do a bike ride, or you want to give your birthday or your anniversary to World Hunger, or if you want to have some kind of an event that people from outside of your congregation can contribute to, you just go to Team ELCA on the elca.org page. You can get people, and you start a project. Like I gave my 60th birthday to ELCA World Hunger, and I invited people to give a gift that way, and you can raise funds. And so Team ELCA is just for ELCA World Hunger. Take a banner, think about it. Maybe you have a special event or something you could use in that way. But for the most part, our money that we raise is used internationally, and you heard some of the things that the money goes for: relief, development, education, agriculture, there's health care, wonderful programs, very carefully done with partners to use the money well and effectively and to make a difference in many, many people's lives. If you want to know more, you can talk to me, but also feel free to contact the Hunger folks in Chicago.
When there's bread for all people, then my soul shall rest. Oh, my soul, oh, my soul. When there's bread for all people, then my soul shall rest. Oh, my soul shall rest. When there's bread for all people, then my soul shall rest. Oh,
could I have somebody from Bancroft and Our Saviors come forward? I also want to mention that First Lutheran in Wakanda, which closed, gave a generous gift to ELCA World Hunger, and we are grateful for that in their closing months. And there will be certificates mailed to the churches. We were expecting to do it tomorrow, so we're glad to have the chance. Anybody from Bancroft?
Here's Pastor Randall.
What'd you say?
I grew up in Bancroft.
You grew up in Bancroft? And do you serve Bancroft or?
Our Saviors.
Oh, you're at Our Savior. Oh, you're Andy. Yes. Okay. Have a fat cow. Thank you. All right. There's nobody else?
Nobody's here from there.
Okay, great. And we do have boxes for you. Oh, yeah. Let Sawyer take your picture. Go stand with Randy.
Thanks, Erica. Appreciate your work. What? You did good. Microphone 1. 3.
It's not working? Oh,
No,
Lene Sorensen from here in Sioux Falls at Hope. Bishop, I'm wondering if either you or Secretary Berger might be able to help us to understand what we can do now that these constitutional changes has happened. Will that trickle down? Will we get something from the Constitutional Committee for our own congregations if we're changing language to ministers of word and service, ministers of word of sacrament? And when will that be available?
Oh, that was a great question. You know, let's ask our secretary to
That
answer.
was a softball that I'm glad you asked. If you should go to www.elca.org, go to the resources button, go down to the picture of the 3 secretaries of this church, Office of the Secretary, click on that, click on Constitution, and the current Constitution has been there since last September 1st. So the current version is available, elca.org, Resources, Office of the Secretary, Constitutions, and the updated version is there. Do update your constitutions, please.
We also have the same link on our website. So if you go to the South Dakota Synod website, we would also have the same link embedded under the same exact place under Resources. So we have the new model constitution that's already up and available.
Then do we have to follow the same process whenever we make a constitutional change so when we write all that and change it at Hope Lutheran, we send it to you for approval before we take it before our congregation for a vote?
You know, I think we should call upon the secretary of the church.
It depends. If you are adopting your constitution in conformity with the model constitution, you do send your new constitution to the synod, but it's effective upon the adoption of the amendments. If you are doing something that's not in conformity, you pass it, send it to the secretary or to the synod, and when the synod gives you approval, it's effective. The key word is it in conformity with the model? If it's not, it'll take longer. And also it's a higher percentage required to pass because there it's a 2/3 vote. If it's in conformity, it's a majority vote one time and is effective upon adoption, but you still want to send it to the synod.
So it is really important for you to send a copy to my office. I cannot overemphasize that enough. The first thing that we do when there's an opening, when there's a pastor has left, taken another call, is we go and check and see in your church file if you have a current copy of your constitution, because it helps form and shape how we're going to work with you. Because there's some variabilities that are open to you. Some constitutions require the church council to be the call committee. Some you have to be elected. Some have to be elected by the whole congregation. So depending on what your constitution says in that particular part dramatically affects how we work with you. If you have to have a specially called congregational meeting to call your church or call committee, that's going to take some extra steps in your world. But you have to, so it helps us if we have the current copy. That's just the short answer. And then it also helps us as we look to see how current it is. So in my 10 years, the record is a 1930 Constitution, and I am not kidding. They had never changed their Constitution because it was never a requirement through every merger that happened last century. To go into the new denomination, you didn't have to It was not a helpful document. First of all, only men could be serving, which was not necessarily the case. And only a man could be called. And the entire document was 2 pages long. So, other than that, it was a great constitution. Jesus was mentioned briefly. Microphone 2.
Jim Fowler, I'm pastor at Trinity in Vermilion. The conformity comment raised a question in my mind. We are in the process of basically replacing the Constitution that we now have with a Constitution that will be based on the model. Do the rules about continuity or conformity apply then, or do we need to do more votes and stuff like that?
I think you should come back up,
I thought
Secretary
that might be
Burton.
the case. Thank you.
He does not have his steps in today, I'm just telling you.
If you are amending your Constitution, you have to follow the amendment process that's in your current Constitution. So if you have not, since the creation of the ELCA, amended your Constitution to include the conformity clause, then you're going to have to follow what's there. If you have done it since the ELCA came into being, your amendment section is in conformity and it does allow that. But if you're 30 years into this and are now getting to your Constitution, you'll have to use the process of your current Constitution to let you be in conformity for 3 years from now when you have to do it again.
Love it. So we have one more introduction. You saw her earlier on during my report. You saw her as she was talking about being able to speed up her educational process. I did mention her then that we had celebrated her ordination, and I didn't see that she was here earlier. But if Pastor, the Reverend Renee Beamer, would please come forward. The newest pastor in South Dakota. Yes, we have. If you want to say hi, you can. You could tell them where you serve even.
Sure. Wow, you guys look really good from up here. I am Renee Bamer, ordained I'm on my 3rd day of being ordained, so it has been an exciting week. I am serving at Peace Lutheran just down the road across town, which I might be a little biased, but I think is the best congregation in the Synod. So.
Let's not start that.
Let's not start that. Oh, I didn't know that was one of the rules. What else am I supposed to talk about?
No, you did good. You can go sit down if you, yeah. What was that? All right. I'm going to let you go. Is there anything else oh, wait a minute. Is Loris Borkart available? Is she out there? Can somebody grab her? Lois? Yep, it's her birthday today. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Lois. Happy birthday to you. Thank you, Lois. Well, let's do this. Have some off time. Go see the vendors. Enjoy yourself. Please come to the banquet. The food has been prepared by a great friend of ours, and he's now a family member by marriage. So I mean, the good part would be if you don't eat all the food, it's coming to my house. I'm just telling you. And if you do eat all the food, then I won't feel bad. But my oldest son, our oldest son, Josh, is married to Emily Minahan, who's from down in the Canton area, and her dad is just one of the best barbecue makers in the whole world. So the meal tonight has been served by him and his family, and that are celebrating their 50, 55th, and 60th anniversary of their ordination. And then we're going to hear from Molly this evening. So thanks for a great day. I forget many things, but I don't forget to pray. Good Lord. I was thinking, Dave's probably got his steps in, and you sing really well. How about if we sing? Let's stand up. And how about if we did just praise God, from whom all blessings flow? Would that be okay with you? Can you give us a note? Really? Oh.
Praise God from whom all blessings flow. Praise Him, all creatures here below. Praise Him above the heavenly host. Praise Father, Son,
Enjoy your time. Have fun with the vendors. Enjoy the meal. We'll see you back.